A group of people with a shared goal have come together to create a project which could reshape the footballing landscape on the Isle of Man. Their plan is simple in theory: enter a new club into the English non-league structure with the ambition of reaching the Football League in 12 years. The execution of that plan, however, has taken years of research, countless meetings and hours of hard work to get the venture off the ground and get to the stage we're at now. Over the course of this programme, I'll talk to key figures from both the Isle of Man Football Association, the sport's governing body on the island, and one of the brains behind the project which has got many people dreaming of a Manx club climbing the football pyramid. This is FC Isle of Man, changing the game. The concept of a Manx club being entered into the English non-league structure has been bubbling away for more than a decade. Certain quarters have been yearning for more, aspiring to compete at a higher level than is currently possible when turning out for the Isle of Man FA representative side. In 2019, though, a bold new venture was proposed by a group of 9 people, with both a footballing and business background, to bring about what they saw as the necessary change to reinvigorate the sport on an island of 80,000 people. FC Isle of Man was born and quickly caught the imagination of the local football community. One of the co-founders of the club was Paul Jones, who also manages the Isle of Man FA senior men's side.
It's really only the last 18 months now that we looked at it and thought, well, we're saying this should happen. We've been saying for 12 years this should happen and been waiting for somebody to do something about it, and nothing has happened. The state there's certain challenges in the local football game across all age groups at this moment in time, and we felt that there was a need for a change. There was a need for something to reinvigorate the local game, but whatever it was couldn't do any damage to the local game, and we were pondering all these questions and potential solutions, and we thought, you know what, we need to have this bridge between the local game and the professional game. We need to find a way to help our better players play at a higher level more consistently, and we also need to reflect the needs of the local game and make sure it doesn't do any damage. And because we were having these thoughts, we were kind of like, well, maybe we're the right people to give it a go, because someone else might come in and not think about the local game. A
working group was formed comprising of Jones, Steve Burns, Lee Dixon, Gary Waitman, Ty Smith, Mark Potts, Les Nicol and Tony Keating. Together, they were aiming to attempt something that had never been done on the island before. But did this come as a surprise for the Isle of Man FA? Frank Stennett is the body's chief executive.
Going back in time, Paul Jones, who's the island manager, as you know, for our team, he'd advised us in quite detail that he was proposing to go down this route, and we were very happy with the outline proposals Paul had at that time. Paul, as you possibly know, is very professional, very slick in his presentation. So what happened was, from the process point of view, Paul came in to speak to the board members and did a presentation outlining his plans for FC Isle of Man and the bigger sporting club that he's looking to put in place. And at that time we said, you know, we're more than happy to progress this to the Isle of Man FA Council, and at the end of the day the council makes decisions as to who joins the association.
October the 8th, 2019, and the 26 member clubs of the FA are asked to vote on whether or not to allow FC Isle of Man to become an affiliate club. In the months building up to the vote, Jones & Co have been holding a series of meetings, answering any concerns and questions people have on what the new club would mean for the Manx game. Off the record, the FC Isle of Man committee are confident of receiving the backing. They had every right to be, with a flood of support coming their way, 25 clubs for, just the one against.
What do you think the overwhelming vote, 25 clubs to 1, tells you? I mean, do you think it is a reflection that there is mass discontent amongst Manx footballers at the moment?
I think rather than say it that way round, I think it's sort of providing a different opportunity to what we can do. There's various people that shall we say, knock the FA about numbers of players playing and things like that. Ultimately, the clubs, the 26 member clubs, need to attract players in to go training twice a week or whatever they have on their schedules and then playing. But there's so many different factors taking into account why people's time is spent not necessarily on a football pitch anymore. They might be playing, you know, FIFA 2020 games or whatever it may be, online games. I think the overriding sort of considerations was it gives a different format, a different environment for people on the Isle of Man to play football and to progress from where we are at present.
How important was being affiliated to the Isle of Man Football Association? Because it could have been somewhere else, but did it need to be the Isle of Man FA for this whole venture to work?
I guess yes and no. We could have had an Isle of Man, a Manx football club, and play all our games off the Isle of Man, but that would have kind of gone against the whole ethos and the principles and the philosophy behind why we're trying to do what we're trying to do. So in order for us to play home games in the Isle of Man, then we have to be affiliated to the Isle of Man FA. Now, if the vote hadn't have gone our way, then there were maybe other doors open to us that we may have gone down, but ultimately I think that would have driven a wedge between the football club and the Manx football community and maybe the wider community, which again goes against the whole ethos of doing it.
What is the next step? We've secured affiliation with the Isle of Man Football Association from next season.
The support to affiliate next season. So we're still technically not affiliated and we're not a football club.
So what is the next step?
The next step is to reassure the Northwest Counties Football League that we are, or that they can apply on our behalf to the English FA, that we're worth them doing that, and that we have a business case that will that reassures them that everything will be all right over a 2 or 3 year period as a minimum. We have really until the beginning of December sort of time this year, so it's not long at all. The next 8-9 weeks really to reassure them in ways around, from business plans to ground tenure and leaseholds and various other bits and pieces. And then they present a case on our behalf to the English FA, and then we'll find out in the end of March next year, 2020, whether we have been accepted into the National League system. We're had some really great conversations with the Northwest County League. They're super supportive in helping us to get to that stage and get in front of the English FA. So I don't envisage that part, them applying on our behalf being a stumbling block. That any stumbling block might occur if we're unable to reassure the English FA of our business plan, and really the next stage for us is to talk with potential partners and sponsors and help the Manx community to signal that they're willing to support us in some way, shape or form.
Comparisons are often drawn between the Isle of Man and other small jurisdictions, and many have noticed parallels in this regard too. Jersey, the largest of the Channel Islands, launched its own journey in the English non-league structure last year. After being rejected by UEFA, Jersey Bulls FC instead received approval to join Division 1 of the Combined Counties League, 6 divisions below League 2, the lowest tier of the English Football League system. So which division would FC Isle of Man begin in, should everything go to plan?
In a similar manner to Jersey Bulls, FC Isle of Man would also join a league 6 tiers below EFL League 2 and 10 below the Premier League. However, they would be in either North West Counties League Division 1 North or North West Counties League Division 1 South, depending on the island's proximity to the other clubs competing in the respective leagues. The southern boundary may be subject to change at the end of this season. Should FC Isle of Man be admitted into the South Division, they could face teams such as Wythenshawe, Vauxhall Motors and Cheadletown. Conversely, if they were in the northern section, they may come up against the likes of Ashton Town, Chadderton and Garstang. The route to the EFL would require them to be promoted to the North West Counties Premier, Northern Premier League Division 1 North West, Northern Premier League Premier Division, National League North and the National League.
Let's gauge the reaction, what it's been like from that wider footballing community, because it seems like there's been a lot of support, a lot of positivity. Have there been any concerns raised with you? I mean, what's been the most difficult question that you've had to answer through this whole process so far?
Yeah, there's been lots of concerns, and quite rightly so. If we feel there's an awful lot of pressure on our shoulders to make sure that we don't mess things up. don't make the current situation in Manx football worse than it is at the moment. You know, we're very aware of that, and a lot of the questions we have had and challenges we've had are around that, really. You know, player retention. You're going to be taking players out of local game, and we're already struggling to attract players. So how does that work? You know, where you're going to get the money from, because you need loads of money, and you know, we're really struggling anyway in the local game to attract sponsors. So how are you going to be able to do it? You know, if players are playing for FC Isle of Man, can they play in the local game? And you know, a lot of it has been about the detail and the logistics, to be honest, which I completely understand. And I guess our role was to reassure that we've thought things through, but we don't maybe have all the answers, but we'd like to work with them to figure it out. Because if we just go off by ourselves, then the likelihood is it might not have the best outcome for the local game. So there's a huge amount of challenges that we face in lots of different areas in order to make sure that this is a positive thing for Manx football and the Manx community.
And therein lies the two biggest obstacles FC Isle of Man faces: who plays for them and who funds them. Dealing with the squad first, I asked Frank Stennett what safeguards will be put in place to prevent, say, one Manx side being raided of a large number of players, which would likely harm their chances of success on the local scene.
As we've seen on the Isle of Man over the past 10, 15 years, one side has been particularly dominant in the form of St George's. Does there need to be some legislation, some wording around a rule or law change at the Isle of Man FA to say that FC Isle of Man can't simply take a full 11 players, or however many it is, off St George's to play for this FC Isle of Man?
Well, one thing I would say, when Paul made his presentation, he was very he was very considerate, shall we say, to not affecting Manx football in any major shape or form. Obviously, there'll be players coming from clubs, but I think he's going to work on the basis, with his colleagues, of course, that there'll be a set number of agreed players coming from any one club. You know, we can't start asking 11 players to go from one club, be it St George's or whoever that club may be. But if there's an agreed format, there's an agreed formula, and all parties agree to it, I can't see there being any major issues at all.
Who will play for this club? How will the players in the squad be selected? Can they play for their local clubs as well? Who will be making those selections?
Again, I don't know. There's this moment in time, as far as that last question, who's going to make the selections, we're not sure. There will be as we said all along, an open and transparent selection or interview process and application process to some of the key roles within the club. We, as a board, haven't quite got as far as thinking how that will happen, because we're busy trying to make sure the club is there. But once we know the club is there, or has a very good chance of being there in March, then we can start working towards, well, you know, we're on like little short-term projects. The first short-term project was getting the affiliation vote. Now the next project is making sure North West Counties Football League are happy to apply for our application to the National League system. Then once we've done that, it's about making sure we've got the business case for the English FA to agree to that application. Then once we've got that, it's then about, well, now we need the logistics of a football club and putting 25 games on in the Isle of Man and going away for 25 games. So we're trying not to get too ahead of ourselves in some ways, but we understand a lot of people would like to know some of the answers, and I'm being honestly saying I'm not 100% sure of what those answers are at this moment in time. Will players be able to still play in the local game? Yes, they will if they want to. You know, so there's, you know, we're not daft. We spoke to quite a lot of the players, and some have said they would like to be able to dual register. Great. And some have said that they don't want to dual register and they would just want to play for FC Isle of Man, which people may believe or may not believe. But the training that they would have with FC Isle of Man, even if they don't play on a Saturday, is more enjoyable for them than playing in the local game on a Saturday. What we've proposed, and hopefully will happen very soon, is that we sit down with a working group of the Isle of Man FA member clubs and we start to talk about how it will work in relation to players and player registration and who plays where and when. They'll be the ones that drive it, really.
Football transfers raise eyebrows when you get to the elite level, with astronomical price tags slapped onto the world's most high-profile stars. Whilst that sort of money won't be spent by FC Isle of Man, the transfer market does provide another cause for thought. Could the club become a victim of its own success and need to bring in foreign imports, i.e. non-Manx players, into the squad? Surely that would defeat the object of why the club was launched in the first place.
In 4 or 5 years, if we bounce up promotions, then, you know, in all likelihood, you'll just have FC Isle of Man players and they won't play in the local game.
That strikes another question, though, because as you do progress up the non-league structure, if you were to get into the English Football League, into League 2, that would signal a success for you.
Yep.
and vindicate wanting to play at a higher level, cement your ambition, and I'm sure you'll be very fulfilled with that. But with that comes added pressure to sustain that success. Will semi-pros be signed for FC Isle of Man if we were to get to the next level and feel that we needed to add quality? Has that been considered?
Yeah, very much so. Our naive model is that we have a development system on the Isle of Man that is working 5 years in advance. So we're looking, can we develop or make sure there are players and a sufficient number of players to play at the level we'll be playing at in 5 years' time, not necessarily the level we're at now. So the whole thing about this is about helping the Manx community be better in whatever way it might be, and we're very keen, and we believe we not only have the skill set, but we have the people on the Isle of Man, whether that is within the junior football sections at the moment and the players, or whether that is other areas of expertise within the Manx community, to develop players who are good enough to play in League 2 football and have as many Manx players as possible in that squad. So our model isn't to bring people in off island and to buy players in off island, or to get loan players in off island, unless it's an Adam Long or a Dean Pinnington or a Liam Doyle or a Seamus Sharkey or somebody who has a Manx connection. Now, to do that, we need an awful lot of forethought and long-term planning in order to have players ready for when we get to those levels. Now, clearly, if we don't do that, if we have bounced up to League 2 in the next 8 years, and we don't have the players on the Isle of Man, then we might need to think about, well, how are we going to sustain this? Or there's a big decision which the club will have to make, and because it's a community club, it will be all the members of the club. Do we say, no, we're only going to do this with majority Manx residents? And if so, we've got to accept that success off the pitch, with everything that the club will bring, might not always be matched on the pitch. And there'll be times when we might drop down a division or two, but it's still creating jobs for the community. It's still giving people something to come and watch.
Arguably the largest stumbling block for FC Isle of Man, though, is funding. With the plight of Blackpool, Bolton and Bury, among others, hitting the headlines in recent years, the issue of finance cannot be ignored. Money is always a factor. For every business venture. We've had this discussion before. None more so in football. We've seen that, especially in very recent times.
You're going out of business,
And you've previously said it will take around £250,000 per year to keep this club afloat. How long term then can you think and can you plan without the guarantee of future funding?
Good. It is a good question. I mean, we have to plan 3 years. 3 years business plans is what we're kind of working on at the moment. It's very difficult. If we were purely looking at it from a money-making venture, we'd go and play in the League of Ireland, or we'd go and play in a different league. But that's not open to us, really, and that would completely wreck the local game. So we have to live within our means, and it's very difficult at the minute because we don't know what those means are, because we don't know at the minute how much sponsorship revenue we're going to bring in. We don't know how many average gates we're going to have. We don't know how many season ticket holders we're going to have. We don't know how many members we're going to have. So there's a minimum break even, which is around that figure, but maybe a little bit less depending upon deals that we can get done. And we believe on the business model we've got that we can achieve that. The bigger question is, how much more can we go beyond that? And if we can go beyond it by X amount, then it means we can then reinvest back into the local community. We can start creating jobs on the Isle of Man within professional, or sport. We can start doing over and above just getting a team off the Isle of Man. And that really, when you're asked what's the next stage is just working that out.
One fundamental question surrounding this project is about finance. You just touched upon it there. You're chief executive of the Isle of Man FA. You know the costs of running football over here. A figure that's been quoted has been £250,000 per season. Is that feasible? Do you think that can happen? Are you confident that they can make it work?
Well, it's not my confidence that's really needed as such, but I think when you're looking at those sort of figures, you have to take into account benchmarks have been set. If you look at Guernsey FC, that's the sort of figure, and more actually, to go and play in the sort of Hampshire leagues where they were playing at that time. So yeah, I don't think £250,000 is a figure just plucked out the air. I think it's probably quite a realistic figure. Every time we go away with a team, you're taking 20, 25 people, it's very costly. In our case, for FA competitions in particular, we are reimbursed by the FA, and long may that continue.
That's the next bit, is market research around that, so we can be much stronger with our numbers, so as we know when we're talking to business potential sponsors and partners, which we are doing already at the moment, we know the percentage that we need from them to make sure we can make it viable, and then the rest will come from gate receipts and various other things. But you know, when you look at it, we're going to have 25 games on the Isle of Man. You know, it doesn't need 3,000-4,000 people turning up to the games to make a serious amount of money from match day revenue if people turn up. Now, if we're only going to get 100 people there every week, we're not really going to have a football club long term, you know, and that's the bit that we've got to figure out, is are there people out there that will help us to get through the first 2 or 3 years before the public come, or will the public come in the first 3 years, and then we can work with sponsors over a longer period of time to make it even more sustainable? So they're great questions, and that's really part of what we're trying to figure out at the minute. We know what we need to hit, but the percentage of whether that's coming from partners or the Manx community in a variety of different ways, we're not sure yet, but we need people to signal to us what they will and won't do. And if we don't get signals and people don't say, yeah, we're prepared to do this, that and the other, then we can't really build a sustainable business plan. And we're looking far more at either individual kind of donations or partners who are prepared to back this to a decent amount of money in order to make up for the lack of community support, maybe. But then why would they back it if the community support isn't there? So it's very much chicken and egg at the moment.
There is confidence surrounding FC Isle of Man. Plenty of time and effort has been put in behind the scenes in a bid to cover all bases, but there's no guarantee of success. Do you think that the debate is over if this doesn't work? Do you think that we've given it our best shot, and that the Isle of Man FA, the system that we had and have at the moment, is ultimately the one which is the only one that can work?
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I think, you know, ultimately, yes. Ultimately, I think if it can't be done the way we're attempting to do it, then it's very difficult for it to work, other than if someone with an awful lot of money says, we're going to do this, and that'll blow apart local football. So I think if it doesn't work now, it won't work in this way again for a long, long time, and there's no point revisiting it. The only point to revisit it is if you've got a multi-millionaire who's saying, well, I'm just going to bankroll this, and then you'll end up making decisions that are the right thing for the football club and not the local community. So yeah, I think it is a little bit of do or die in some ways. Yeah, we've either got to make it work and it sticks, or if it doesn't work, then I can't see, yeah, even if we have 2 or 3 seasons at it, and if it's not working, if people aren't turning up and sponsors are saying we're not prepared to bankroll it, then, you know, it isn't going to work. You know, that's why we're trying to do it the way we're doing it, to try and get as many people aware of the message and also how it can positively impact our local community. I
really genuinely hope that FC Isle of Man is a real success, and it brings opportunities that we don't even know at the moment exactly how it's going to roll out. But I'd also endorse the fact that I'd give credit to Paul Jones, because he came in, did his presentation, and from that moment in time, he's been very professional about the whole approach and how he's done things. He's been very considerate about players and player quotas and the club considerations. So from that perspective, we're absolutely delighted Paul's heading this, and as I say, I'd wish them the very best of luck.
How do you know whether something's going to be there in 100 years? Well, there's something that's already been here for 100 years. You know, it's like when you look back, the new things tend not to last as long as something that's been there for 50, 100 years already. So that's why it's a shock when Bury goes in, you know, out of business, when Bolton are in administration, because they've been clubs that have sustained within their communities for 80, 90, 100 years, and we're trying to start something up from scratch. So the plan is for it to be around in 100 years' time. Yeah, but these next 5 years are the critical bit, and if we don't get the next 5 right, then can't see how it can happen, because the community is signalling to all of us that they don't want to support something like this. And if that's the case, then that's the case, and we know, and we'll move on, and we'll hopefully the charity will still be there, and we can still reinvest back into Manx sport and the Manx community, but it won't be through football. But we'll all be able to look back and go, you know what, we did it the best way we possibly could. We've given it a bit of a go, and if someone else is going to do it, it's going to have to be in a very different way, and it could it might not have as many positive impacts as we're trying to have.
One thing is for certain though, if FC Isle of Man does fail, it won't be for lack of trying.